This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Now that the 2024 college football season is officially over, how did my preseason predictions do? Let's look back and probably laugh. Next on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Yep, caught.
They said you can't beat Ohio State. Now what?
Brady gets terrific. Throws it, and a touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Greetings, Go Blue. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. And this is always one of the more bittersweet episodes we do because it means that Q is correct. All good things must come to an end, Jean-Luc. The college football season, otherwise known around here as the most wonderful time of the year, is officially over at the time we're taping this. We're about 205 days away from the next time we will see a college football game that counts. Nevertheless, the sport now doesn't sleep between the transfer portal, recruiting, coaching news, etc. Before you know it, it'll be July in time for Big Ten Media Days again. Heck, even before that. Well, before that, it'll be Memorial Day weekend, and the preseason magazines will be out in force for the following fall once more. So what we like to do with this episode every year is look back on one portion of my college football preview that I've published every year since I was a sophomore in high school. And it is my crystal ball, the top 25 things I predicted would or would not happen over the course of the college football season. And of course, I can't be asked to hold myself accountable. I think we all know I'm not capable of that. I'll find a way to spin everything into a correct prediction. So we need an objective source. So joining us for the entirety of this week's episode, it's our good friend, Mark Rogers, who now knows what it's like to be a Michigan fan. He now knows what it's like to be a national champion. Mark, congratulations to your Buckeyes. I'd say it's the greatest ever 4-game run to the national championship, but it's the only, so far, 4-game run to the national championship. Therefore, I guess it's kind of the greatest. So let's start there, brother. How does it feel?
Well, somebody has to be the Lewis and Clark of the college football playoff. And of course, the Buckeyes were in 2014 in the 14 playoff. They took the first year there, and then 2024. So if I could get this program tricked into thinking that every year is some kind of a historic first in regards to structure and format, then maybe we could actually claim some more national championships. And as soon as you said bittersweet, Steve, I just thought, the bittersweet ratio for you is slightly different than it was at this point after last college football season.
Correct. Is it true that Ohio State is petitioning for college football to alter, expand, change the playoff formula every single year, since that seems to be the years you all do win this thing, is when some new advent to the system emerges, that's when you win it. So you guys want this system to change and evolve every single year, right?
Exactly. That's my proposal, is that I in some way can trick this program into thinking that there's some kind of change, some landmark decision that has changed the structure of the sport, and therefore it's time to go win another national championship. And by the way, Steve, did I hear that right? You started this process back when you were a sophomore in high school?
Yeah, I was challenged. I was at the Michigan basketball camp, but the summer before my JV year, and was reading Lindy's college football preview. And it was for 1988, and I was really ticked off. I thought they had Michigan ranked too low. I turned out to be right. We ended up finishing the top 5 that year. And one of my buddies in our dorm challenged me to, well, if you think you can do a better job, write your own. So I did. And I predicted that Florida State was going to play West Virginia for the national championship in the Fiesta Bowl. I was half right. West Virginia and Major Harris did get there. They ended up playing Notre Dame instead. And so I kind of thought I was an idiot savant. I'm going to do this every year the rest of my life. And what I found is it's not as easy as maybe I thought at the time that it was. So I've just kind of stuck with it. And the crystal ball is one of the first things I do is kind of lay out, an overall paradigm for how I think the season will go. And that is the crystal ball. It's not the entirety of my predictions, as you know, but it's kind of a summary of them. So we had you here last year to walk us through, and I ended up doing pretty well last year. If you go back and watch that episode, my crystal ball last year is one of the best ones I've ever done. So I've not even looked at many of these. I don't think I've seen these since July when they got published. So I'm not even sure what's in here, how many of them I remember. And I did that on purpose because I kind of wanted to walk through these with the audience from when we put them up here on the show last summer. So you ready to go? You're going to decide no points.
Absolutely.
1 point or a half point. All right.
This is fun being the critic. And by the way, Steve, you are not the only nerdy 16-year-old sophomore who's doing things like that. I was writing a 10,000-word, 16-team college football playoff proposal for an English class when I was a sophomore. Way ahead of its time. The 16-team proposal.
As my wife has told me many times over the course of our 28 years of marriage, if she had not born my 3 children herself, she'd swear I'm still a virgin. Indeed. Yes, I have as much useless information as anyone who doesn't have perpetual virginity as a pox on their house. So you ready to go?
I am ready.
All right, here we go. Here's the first prediction I made. After never having a 2-loss team make the college football playoff during the 4-team era, we will have a 3-loss team make it the very first year of the 12-team era. I came close on this. Came down to Alabama, a 3-loss team, and SMU, but that did not happen, Mark. So a 0.
Well, are we taking conference champions into consideration? Because, of course, Clemson at 10-3.
See?
Nailed it.
See, this is what happens, Michigan fan. They finally get off the schneid, win a national championship, and your Ohio State fans recognize critical thinking yet again. They are able to see things clearly yet again. I know we have robbed them of that the last 4 years in a row by stealing their souls and stomping on it with a steel-toed boot full of pus and moss. But now, Mark, now it is serenity. Now it is tranquility. Now your Ohio State fans are bailing you out. You're right, Mark. We did have a 3-loss team make the championship because it was Clemson. You're right. So I get a point there.
Benefit from me being in a good mood with a national championship.
I am. All right. Let's keep going. Number 2. No team in the FBS will be undefeated heading into the college football playoff. I did get this one wrong. Oregon was undefeated. The only undefeated team. Here's the funny thing, Mark. They ended up being the only undefeated team in the regular season. They're the only 1-loss team left too. How about that?
Yeah. And I know where you were headed on this. It made a whole lot of sense with more teams competing in the playoff, of course, and it being difficult. And of course, you were just stating in the regular season.
And all these super conferences with these massive schedules now. Yeah.
Yeah, the SEC and the Big Ten becoming much tougher. And let's note, to your defense, that there were 3 teams that completed the regular season in 2023 undefeated, and only, of course, Oregon was able to do it this year.
All right, number 3. So I've got 1 point so far. All 4 of the Power Conference championship games will be rematches from the regular season. Well, Oregon did not play Penn State, so I lost on that one. Clemson did not play SMU, so I lost on that one. Texas and Georgia was a rematch. And Iowa State and Arizona State did not play during the regular season. So I was way off on this one, Mark.
Yeah, I would like to squeeze out a half point, but we can't do that. We need to maintain standards on this crystal ball. So,
and if there's one thing we Michigan fans always say about you Bugnuts is you guys know how to maintain standards. So I agree. All right. Sorry. It is still a rivalry, right? Number 4. None of the teams moving to new conferences this year will win their conference titles in their first year in their new league. Wrong again. Oregon did. Arizona State did. And that's one of the most improbable conference championships we've seen and may ever see, is what Arizona State did this year. But Oregon and Arizona State both won the conference in their first years. Of course, the other Power 4 teams, Clemson is an ACC legacy team, Georgia an SEC legacy team. And when you look across, this was Army's first year competing in that American, right? Because they won that league too.
Yes.
So, yeah.
We were close to a 4-game sweep, though, a 4-conference sweep. You know, if Texas loses in overtime in the SEC championship game, SMU loses on a last-second field goal.
Mm-hmm.
So could have been all 4 newcomers.
Number 5, the biggest in-season debate no one is talking about right now is what will still be largely unknown tiebreakers to determine who makes conference championship games in leagues with no division. So this is subjective to you as a guy that covers the sport at 24/7, 365 on your fantastic channel here on YouTube, the voice of college football. How much do you think that, keep in mind, I'm writing this in July, and no one's even, and at that time, these leagues haven't even listed their tiebreakers yet. We have no clue with all these unbalanced schedules, who these teams are going to be and who's going to get in. So do you think I was right that we were underestimating the impact of that? Do you think I overstated it?
Steve, if I could give you 10 points, I would for this one. 1 point with a gold star. Just think about where we stood on the final weekend of the season. The SEC had a conglomerate of teams,
right,
in that 5-2, 6-1 range. We had all sorts of crazy. We had Texas A&M, who had lost the non-conference game, had 3 losses going into the final weekend with a legitimate shot
destiny
to play in the SEC championship game. LSU, who people wrote off, but they didn't look at the factors involved. They were playing for a potential SEC championship game spot. Of course, we had a 4-way tie for the number 1 seed in the Big 12. We had a situation in the ACC where Miami, SMU, and Clemson coming down the stretch were all undefeated and would not have played each other. We could have had a 3-way tie, which would, beyond the other tiebreakers, would have been the worst situation for me to actually have a undefeated team in a conference have to sit home for a conference championship game. That could have happened in the ACC. So I think you just completely nailed this. As a guy who breaks down these situations from week to week as we go through November, absolutely.
Mark, what do you think of my proposal that unless head-to-head comes into play, which should always be the number 1 tiebreaker, unless head-to-head comes into play, then just have the college football playoff committee rankings determined then. See what I'm saying? I mean,
if we're going to have a playoff system that's going to be tweaked, that's going to de-emphasize these conference championship games, then I think we're going to have to go to something like that. But I want that committee to decide as little as possible in college football.
I just don't know about 7 rounds of codicils deciding it either, but I hear you. Okay. All right, number 6, Ryan Day will leave Ohio State after the season to take over for the retiring Andy Reid as head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, and he'll be replaced by Florida State coach Mike Norvell. Now, I actually think the first half of this, I think it's possible. I do. I think you're kind of watching this is the Chiefs. This iteration, I mean, Pat Mahomes is just now entering actually the prime of his career, but this iteration with Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, Pat Mahomes, this kind of feels like Michael Jordan Last Dance territory, and it would not shock me at all. They called a guy with the offensive reputation of a Ryan Day, but that latter half, all the gold stars you wanted to give me for the previous one have to be taken away after Florida State went 2-10. Okay, I mean, that is one of the worst. In fact, I think it was Michigan State under Mark D'Antonio. The year they went 3-9, they had a 9-game reversal, I want to say, from 20, right? And it was like the worst in the AP poll era any team had done.
8
Florida
games.
State,
Yep.
Florida State, did they surpass that, I think? Didn't they? Yeah, they went from, what was it, 13-0, 13-1 to 2-10. So, egads. All right, so go ahead. You're welcome to go ahead and throw dirt on me for that
Day, Steve, are you just going to, you just keep this one from year to year, and then you just change the coach that's going to replace him? Is that
correct? I'll make you a deal. Fair. I think you'll take this deal. If your fans stop issuing him death threats, I'll stop this prediction. Fair?
Fair enough. I've got no defense for those folks.
Let no one say I'm unreasonable, Mark. Yes, if you stop issuing death threats to your coach, I'll stop predicting he's going to leave. I think that's fair. I do.
I think Kirk Herbstreit termed it as well as anyone could. Lunatics. Yes. There you go.
Yes.
The lunatics.
We don't call them buck nuts for
growing.
nothing. Yes, indeed. All right.
So that one always amused me. Yes.
All right. Number 7. Oh boy. He didn't have a good year either. Liberty's Jamie Chadwell will succeed Mike Norvell at Florida State. Jamie Chadwell did not have a good year at Liberty. I mean, they still had a winning season and stuff, but when you consider the resources Liberty has compared to virtually every other Group of 5 program, I mean, a 7-win season for them is, like a losing season, like a 4-8 at North Texas. I mean, they have whatever the realm is between, the power conferences and the Group of 5. They're somewhere in that tier there in terms of resources where they kind of have to try to suck, and they weren't very good this year. So that's a negative. Ghost Rider.
Well, Steve, some of the quantifiable ones that you have, I think you take a very measured approach, but then you've got these freelanced ones that you just kind of take a shot in the dark. And I know you're there's logic involved, but these have a 5% shot maybe of happening. So you're putting yourself out there, I got to admit.
That's why you put $10 on that 300-to-1 parlay 75 times in your life, Mark, and then the one time it hits, that's all it counts. You only got to hit that once, man. Only got to hit that once, says every loser. Number 8. This one was close. Iowa State will win its first conference title since 1912, thus ending the longest conference title drought of any power conference team. As far as I know, I was the only preview in America that even had Iowa State going to the Big 12 championship game. I think that deserves a half a point in my view.
I was rooting for you, Steve, because I too picked Iowa State to win the Big 12 championship over Kansas State.
Okay, so then you and I are the only two that I know of that did that then. Yes.
Yes. Half a point. They made the championship game. Tied for the best record in the conference, of course. Yes.
I mean, Iowa State, just to understand its history, folks, it had its first ever 10-win and 11-win season in the same season. They did it in the same season. I think it's the highest final AP ranking they've ever had, I think. So, all right. So I think a half a point is fair. All right. So I'm at 2.5 right now. All right. Let's go next. Number 9. After losing 4 games in a season, only once between 1969 and 2001, Nebraska will lose at least 4 games for the 21st consecutive season. I'd love to go back and tell our 1998 selves that this was going to happen. Never would believe it. But Matt Rule will take Nebraska to its first bowl game since 2016. I absolutely nailed that one, Mark.
You did, and it looks impressive because you nailed 2 aspects of this on either side. But I think that this was fairly safe. I was right there with Nebraska. I think I picked them 6-6. So I was right there on Nebraska. And you have been riding a version of this for a few years now.
Yeah. Hey, it's like if you bet, do you know if you bet Ohio State third quarter in every game this year, regardless of the number, even through the playoffs, do you know you went something like, how many games they ended up playing? 16? I think you went 13-3 against the spread. If you played Ohio State third quarter, no matter what the line was, in every game this year, I think you went 13-3 against the spread. So, yeah, brother, when you find something, write it out. Don't mess with the streak. You bet. Yes. All right, number 10. Mac Brown will retire as North Carolina football coach at season's end, and he will be replaced by Texas State coach G.J. Kinney. I think I get a half a point for this one. One of those things happened. Although,
well,
retirement.
Mac Brown's no longer the coach at North Carolina.
In loose words, yes.
He didn't necessarily know that when he was coaching his final game and made
Correct.
a comment after his weekly news conference. He said, "I'll be back in 2025." But so they snuffed that out within 2 days. G.J. Kinney and Bill Belichick, this is probably the only time they've ever been listed in the same sentence. But
tough but fair.
You were on the trajectory there, definitely.
No one saw Bill Belichick. I mean, this is what it was like when we hired Jimmy. It is literally a national story at ESPN that they are changing the natural grass at Kenan Stadium at North Carolina. I mean, this is this is what happened. We hired, like, literally everything Jimmy did was a national story. Okay, even when he wasn't trying to do stuff. Somehow, in the midst of NBA and college basketball and everything else, it's a national story at ESPN's deck that North Carolina is switching to natural grass. All right, so I'm giving myself a half a point unless you
absolutely.
object.
Absolutely.
Right,
and I just find it funny, Steve, that North Carolina has replaced the soft, cuddly grandparent style of Mac Brown with another old guy, but he's the more ornery, stern, harsh senior citizen, but with the 25-year-old girlfriend, of course. So I guess he can relate to college kids.
Yeah, that's one way of relating. They went from, the gather round kids, I've got a story to tell, Grandpa, to the get off my lawn, Gran Torino, Grandpa. Yes, indeed. What number are we on? 11. Kirk Ferentz will retire as Iowa football coach after the season and be replaced by Kansas coach Lance Leipold. I know a lot of Iowa fans maybe are kind of hoped that this one came true, but it actually did not. So that's a big fat 0.
Maybe if Kirk would have had a better season and broken Woody Hayes' all-time record for Big Ten victories, maybe he would have been more apt to do that.
Now, I have not had a meaningful conversation with Kirk Ferentz in like a decade, but the Kirk Ferentz I used to know, I'd have a hard time believing you just hang around for that record. But on the other hand, when you are that close to it, why not, right? If they're going to let you do it, why not? Are you saying you think he's hanging around to break that record? Is that what you're saying, Mark?
Well, he never struck me as that guy either. Although, again, you have had a direct relationship with him. I have not. I do not know the man, but he doesn't seem to be that, full of himself. I will be the one, though, that will be identifying the winning percentage of those two coaches when it does happen this season. There's certainly a bit of a difference between Woody Hayes and Kirk Ferentz when it comes to winning percentage.
Fair. There is a bit of a difference there. You're right about that. All right. Let's do one more here before we go to the break. Deion Sanders will again fail to take Colorado to a bowl game. Now, hold on. It could be argued that he didn't take Colorado to a bowl game if you saw that appearance, brother, because they never showed up for that game. So in a metaphysical way, I might be right about this. I mean, even though they didn't have any major opt-outs, it didn't look very much like they were at the actual game. 0? Not going for that?
9-3.
Yeah.
It's not they went 6-6 and they doinked one off the upright that went in and they made a bowl game. So
fair.
Give me a half a point.
And they won the Heisman Trophy. I get it. Might have the number 1 pick in the draft. I get it. But man, that bowl game appearance was a no freaking show. It was a no freaking show, no doubt. All right, so I'm at 3 points so far. Last year, I was well into double figures, so I got some ground to make up here on the back end. We'll come back after the break and see if I have sufficiently bribed Mark Rogers into a more lenient grading scale when we return. All right, back here on Michigan Podcast, we're continuing with my crystal ball reconciliation. Just how good or bad were my predictions for the 2024 college football season? We've gone through the first half of my top 25 crystal ball predictions from last summer. Mark Rogers, the voice of college football with a great channel here on YouTube. Definitely, this is the time of year, this offseason, when you really want to be watching. Get out ahead of markets, a lot of good information from correspondents around the country before stuff hits national news and impacts lines. You can really make some good money there if you're tuned in, and not to mention, get some great off-season content as well. And as our one reasonable Bucknut fan, Mark is here to provide a check and balance on my ego. Yeah. And Mark, I think I've got 3 points so far, right? 3 is all I've got. So you're doing a great job of checking 3. And balancing.
And speaking of bragging, I'll throw this one in here. 11-0 straight up in the college football playoff.
That's pretty good. Okay. Now, I also did if we went through the brackets, I predicted an Ohio State Notre Dame final. Remember, I did predict that, right?
You did. That's right. You did.
All right, let's get to it.
As well. I went 11-0.
Other fan bases just have to think we are just obnoxious. Our Michigan and Ohio State are just obnoxious. Let's go to 13. And they're right, by the way. All right, 13. Baylor will fire Coach David. We'll just stop. He was probably Big 12 Coach of the Year, other than the guy at Arizona State. I mean, Aranda had a fantastic bounce-back season. Even after getting his starting quarterback, Daquan Finn, hurt for the year. Something called a Sawyer Robertson came off the bench, and a lot of teams in December tried to pay a lot of money to get him to go into the transfer portal. So give Dave Aranda credit, man. He looked like dead man walking. That was a hella resurrection by his program there. So a big fat 0.
You're running out of opportunities, Steve. Time to step it up here.
Do I get a half a point for knowing the name Sawyer Robertson? Can I get at least a half point
good.
for that?
TCU transfer. Do
Yes.
I get a half point for knowing that? Okay.
No, you know. We're only looking for
Steve.
things that favor me here. It's the Michigan podcast.
Let's
not
be
the Ohio
legit.
State.
We got to keep our standards, Steve. You're not going to feel good about yourself if I'm just gifting points to you.
Yeah, well, you know what? Let's test that theory. Let's test it out. I might not, but let's find out. You're right. All right, number 14. Rutgers will finish with its most regular season wins in a decade. That did happen. First time they'd won 7 or more games in a regular season since 2014, their very first year in the Big Ten. So I got that one completely right, Mark. That's 4 points.
You did, and well done. It does say regular season there, so they won the bowl game the year before to get to 7-6. But yes, a 7-5 regular season, and this is where you pounced on a scheduling opportunity because people most famously look and make fun of that Indiana Big Ten schedule. But Rutgers, no Iowa, no Ohio State, no Michigan, no Penn State, no Oregon. Didn't play the best teams in the conference, and you obviously recognize that. And Greg Schiano is doing a heck of a job.
Doesn't it feel like they still should have done more this year? Like it actually feels like they missed an opportunity this year.
Yes. And they play that horrendous non-conference schedule. There's always Howard and Wagner and those sorts of games.
Especially after they had the nice win at Virginia Tech. It felt like they were going to be better. And it wasn't like a pretty 7-5, like they missed out on a few games, right? It definitely looked like the 7-5 that was a product of the schedule that you talked about too. So
they had a win against Washington where the kicker missed 3 field goals, including the game winner.
Yeah, Washington like tripled them in yardage or something on a Friday night and still lost the game. Yeah. All right, next pick, number 15. This will be the most watched college football season in the sports TV history.
I don't know. The championship game sure wasn't.
Yeah, but when you factor in all I just was doing the math here. We're going to have more meaningful postseason games than we've ever had. You're going to have more playoff games. So the answer to this question is that happened. Yes, it was. Yeah. All right, so
I'll take your word for it. It makes sense that it happened. Sure.
It was kind of a cop-out pick, but yeah. Okay. Although the ratings were not as good as they thought, but the cumulative amount of people that watched, more people watched than ever before. All right, that's number 5. Or 0.5. 16. Look at this. Florida coach Billy Napier will shock many by guiding the Gators to a bowl game despite the nation's toughest schedule, thus saving his job. Recognize. That was a hella pull right there. You want to talk about dead man walking. Billy Napier's funeral plot, Atlas moving van, or moving company reservation, these things had all been made. And they ended up having a pretty decent season. They're kind of bringing everybody back. I mean, they could be your chic off-season, preseason top 10 kind of team with DJ Lagway for next year.
And this is a prediction you pulled out of the fire. They didn't get off to a good start.
Right.
They were in a coin flip type game, according to Vegas, against Miami. They got obliterated. A couple weeks later, Texas A&M is walking off the field in a 20-point win, and the swamp is just booing and calling for Billy Napier's head. That infamous 7-game stretch starting in late October where they were facing 7 consecutive top 10 teams. They went 5-2 in those games. Yes.
It's incredible. It's not even, it was impressive enough that he got them to a bowl game, but the way that he did it, where they started off weak, that's when you would have thought people just kind of mailed it in and thought, well, he's gone. I got to take care of me now. To get them to rally after they started off so poorly and to finish strong makes it even doubly more impressive, in my view, Mark.
Absolutely.
And I think it speaks well for where they're going next year, for sure. They're in the SEC. All right, so I'm at 5 points now, correct? Or am I at 6?
6.
6. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. All right, number 17. For the first time ever, Wisconsin will fail to make the Big Ten championship game for a 5th consecutive season. This one's going to be another reoccurring prediction because I don't think they're getting back to the Big Ten championship game mark for a few minutes. In fact, I'm pretty confident it's going to be a long time before we see a Big Ten championship game that isn't some variation of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon versus one another, with maybe a Nebraska, USC can sneak in there if they get their acts together. The era of Mark D'Antonio and Kirk Ferentz and Bo Pelini making championship games at these other schools. Or not Bo Pelini, I mean Paul Christ, because Pelini was at Nebraska. I don't know that we're going to see that again in the foreseeable future. I don't.
I've pretty much determined, Steve, that after Ohio State, I'm not one of these people that has a second team or a third team, but I have a collection of teams, actually, and they're called the old Big Ten West. I root for Purdue, and I root for Northwestern, and I root for Wisconsin. I hate to see this decline out of Wisconsin. I want to see 10-2 Wisconsin teams. Why? I just don't know. I just think it's good for college football. It's good to see a different part of the country represented in the top 10 or 15 rankings. I always liked when Wisconsin was a factor, playing a different brand of football. And Luke Fickell, if we were holding me accountable for my predictions, I named him as the number one coaching hire of that offseason. And boy, was I wrong to date.
He tried to do what Rich Rod did at Michigan in terms of changing the identity of the program, and it just hasn't worked. Yep. All right, next. So I'm at 7 points now. Number 18, the Heisman Trophy finalist will be in alphabetical order. Carson Beck, no. In fact, he played himself out of the draft and had to transfer to rebuild his draft profile. Donovan Edwards just never got going. Dylan Gabriel, that ended up happening. Jalen Milroe, no. So not even a half a point here, unfortunately.
You called it, Steve. I don't think I need to make a decision or a call on this one.
You're welcome to just give me a point if you want, and find out if I am ashamed of it, and we can test that out. If you want to just give me one, no.
You're the better man, Steve, than that.
I'm a better man for it. Yes. All right, moving on. Number 19. That didn't happen. But what's crazy is Carson Beck not only didn't win the Heisman. What's even crazier is Georgia hasn't won one of these since 1982 with Herschel Walker. That's crazy when you stop and think about it. But Carson Beck did not have the year that was expected of him at all. So that's a big fat zero, and we're stuck on 8 points, Mark.
I'm looking, Steve, beyond the horizon here at some of these predictions coming up. And boy, just brace yourself.
All right. Well, thank you for that confidence builder, Mark. Appreciate that. Number 20. The results of the top 5 September non-conference games will be Texas over Michigan. I got that right. LSU over USC, wrong. Texas A&M over Notre Dame, wrong. Florida over Miami, wrong. Iowa over Iowa State, wrong. Is that maybe one of the things you were looking forward to? Is the only one I got right was my own suffering?
I would gloat here, Steve, but I only picked 2 out of those 5 right myself. So I don't have much to brag on.
I have this category every year. This is a category I traditionally clean up on, but this year I got cleaned out. All right, number 21. Arizona, Kansas, and Missouri will start the season in the AP Top 25, but won't finish there. I got 2 of those right. Missouri ended up actually finishing 9-3 and did finish in the top 25. So do I at least get a half a point for getting 2 out of 3?
That's a half point. 2 out of 3.
All right.
Sure.
So that puts me at 8.5. All right, number 22. Boise State, Iowa State, and NC State won't start the season in the AP Top 25, but we'll finish there. I got 2 out of 3 there too, Mark. So
well done.
So that puts me to 9.
With NC State as well. I thought NC State was going to be a factor in the ACC, but 2 out of 3.
Yeah, really confounding. And I know that the quarterback transfer from Coastal Carolina got hurt, but they were trending down even before that. It never worked. That was one of the more confounding teams for me this year, for sure. All right, next, where are we going? 23. The following first-year coaches will lead their teams to the postseason. Major Applewhite, no. Trent Bray, no. Brent Brennan, no. Fran Brown, yes. Bob Chesney, yes. Kalen DeBoer, yes. Mike Elko, yes. Jed Fish, yes. Sharon Moore, yes. Gerard Parker, no. John Sumrall, yes. About 50-50. What's your rendering on that?
Well, you were well above 50-50. I counted like 8 out of 12.
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
Or maybe 7 out of 12.
So that's got to be a half a point, maybe.
Factor in, before I give you the half point, because it is coming, let's understand that we've got how many bowl games? Like 69 at this, whatever the number is. So it's 41. So it's pretty easy to make a bowl game. But yes, you got well over half. So I believe 7 of 11, whatever I just counted. I tried to keep up.
Okay.
You got the half point.
All right, that puts me at 10. So I'm in double figures. If I can get to double figures every year, I'm calling it a dub. All right, so that puts me at 10 points. All right, next, liquidate these teams that will win at least 2 fewer games than they did last season. Duke, no. Florida State, yes. James Madison, yes. Michigan, yes. Missouri, didn't they go 11-1, I thought? No, they went 10-2, didn't they? So
yes.
In 23, all right, so no. New Mexico State, yes. Northwestern, yes. Old Dominion, no. San Jose State, yes. SMU, no. Toledo, yes. Troy, yes. Tulane, yes. UCLA, yes. And Washington, yes. I did pretty good there.
So I'm trying to determine, you can't be expected to get all of them. Did we run through about 12 more choices there?
So let's see, 0 for 1, 1 for 1, 2 for 3, 3 for 4, 3 for 5, 4 for 6, 5 for 7, 5 for 8, 6 for 9, 7 for 10, 8 for 11, 9 for 12, 10 for 13, 11 for 14, 12 out of 15.
That's a point. That's a full
point. Okay. So that puts me at 11 points. Okay. Last one. Invest in these teams that will win at least 2 more games than they did last season. Colorado State, yes. Connecticut, yes. East Carolina, yeah, they got to 6-6, didn't they? I thought they did.
Yes.
Okay, so yes. Florida Atlantic, no. Indiana, yes. Nebraska, yes. TCU, yes. Virginia, no. Virginia Tech, no. And I can't remember what Western Michigan did. You'll have to tell me on that one, brother. I don't know. So that's 1 for 1, 2 for 2, 3 for 3, 3 for 4, 4 for 5, 5 for 6, 6 for 7, 6 for 8, 6 for 9. I'll just take the L there and say 6 out of 10. What's 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 11?
Well,
it doesn't make much of a difference.
Point here, regardless of Western Michigan, which I cannot make a call on off the top of my head. That's a half point.
So what did I finish with, 11.5?
Yes.
That's not bad. It's not as good as last year, but it's not bad. Not bad. I take that every year.
Point total was better, and it was just more impressive. I can't recall the exact. There were some narrow threads that you had to weave that you hit on. So let's.
I knew we were going to win the Natty, Mark, and so I knew I had to raise my game. I must confess, like my team, I had a little bit of a post-Natty complacency hangover, but just like my team, notice we finished strong down that back stretch with those last few propositions. We reminded everybody, what the name on the front of the jersey says, and now we've got momentum going into next year. So I'm just mirroring the leaders and best here, Mark. That's all I'm doing, brother. That's all I'm doing.
So you're telling me I should have expected this kind of performance when you showed up and we're going like, if we go 7-5 this year, I'm good.
As long as we beat you guys, I'm good. We're good. So it was good. Yeah. I can't tell you how many people asked me who I was rooting for last Monday night. I said, I don't care who wins. If Ohio State wins, I'm going to laugh that we beat them. If they lose, I'm going to laugh that they didn't win the Natty. I mean, I didn't care. I really didn't care who won. I didn't.
Well, I cared, and it pulled through for me, which I would not have been able to. It would have just been drudgery going through this offseason had Ohio State lost that game.
Dang it.
Didn't have to deal with that.
Fun to watch. No. Yeah, that would have been fun to watch. All right, Mark. Thank you, brother. Appreciate your unbiased and unfettered judgment and you holding my feet to the fire and keeping me accountable. Thanks for the check and balance. Appreciate it.
I enjoy this show each and every year, Steve. So thanks for inviting me to be judge and jury.
You bet you do. And you Buckeyes do judge and jury well. We Michigan fans say that about you all the time. Indeed. Thank you, Mark.
All right, Steve.
This week's Twitter poll results. What grade would you give what Michigan football has done in the transfer portal thus far? 62% of you said B, 22% said A, 17% said C. I think it matters. Listen, if you're just looking at the haul by itself, I'd give it a C. If you're looking at and how On3 does it, which is they measure what you've lost and how you've replaced it, well, then I think you're looking at an A or a B. I mean, Michigan didn't lose anybody of any consequence in the transfer portal at all, surprisingly. So I also think transfer portal talent this year is down. I think now schools are doing a really good job of retaining their top tier guys and paying them to stay. So a lot of Michigan fans are like, well, we didn't get this higher ranked guy. I don't think the higher ranked guys were anywhere near where they were the last couple of years. I'm sorry, but I just don't think a right tackle at Washington State is worth a couple $1 million. And if Nebraska or Wake Forest wants to pay him that, cool. We probably have somebody on our bench at least that good at Michigan, So I think you have to factor in too that schools are now. It's so the transfer portal now is a little bit more like the old Plan B free agency in the NFL was, where teams were able to protect guys. That was kind of the first iteration of free agency in the NFL, because there aren't really a lot of top tier guys except for a few quarterbacks were in there again this year too. All right, that brings us to our feedback of the week. Kirk Stuberg says, "I'm so glad I don't like basketball. Football does enough damage to my heart and soul." I think Dusty's done a very good job. If considering it's year one. Since it's year one, I think you have to give him a lot of credit. I mean, Michigan is playing winning basketball, not always the most aesthetically pleasing and not always the grittiest, as you can see there, as I was responding to the scared and soft effort at Purdue last week. But a lot of teams that have been heavily relying on the transfer portal in college basketball have not played good, have been disappointments, frankly. So he's done a good job getting them to play together, but they do not like playing the physical nature of the Big Ten. And Danny Wolf has got to learn that you're not in the Ivy League, dude. And so just drive into the basket and flailing your body at the rim will not get you a bailout call in our league. The refs will watch you get hammered, and then just their eyes will follow you to the floor. They will keep their whistles in their pocket and then just jog down the floor while you're picking yourself up. You have to attack the rim in our league. You're not going to get bailout flailing calls in our conference. And I just think that a lot of these guys are not used to playing a physical level of basketball. And that's why you've kind of seen us hit a bit of a wall in terms of our efficiency. And then defensively, the weakness of not having really a backup point guard right now, we've got to get more out of either Scottie Pippen's kid or LJ Kaysen, because we're asking a lot of Trey Donaldson on both ends of the floor now. He basically won the Penn State game all by himself the other night. So, I don't think this is a team that will be a factor in the Big Ten championship race at the end of the year, but I think they'll be a solid NCAA tournament team. And coming off of an 8-win, nuclear fallout, the bottom's falling out of your program and only Dusty's first year. Yeah, I think that's an excellent first year, but it does feel like it could have been better with some more toughness. Who knows? Maybe we'll see it down the stretch. We're going to need to. The schedule down the stretch, folks, 10 of Michigan's last 12 games are quad one games, as things stand right now. So, All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, follow, 5-star review, whether you're listening on iTunes, watching right here on YouTube. Let us know what you think in the comments section as well. All of those things help the algorithmic gods take their cue to go find us more Michigan fans just like you. So thank you very much for each and every one. You can follow us in between episodes as well at Michigan Podcast there on X, at Michigan Podcast on X. Until the next time, I'm Steve Dace. We'll see you in a couple weeks right here on Michigan Podcast. Go Blue.